All right, folks. I think we are live and good to go. Welcome. It is Tuesday night, 5 o'clock local time here in Bali. And it's time for The Filter. Thanks for coming, everybody. We have got a good show tonight. The name of the show is The Enemy in Your Pocket, which is hopefully will be a little bit of a philosophical discussion about the dirty green or brown or pink pieces of paper that you have in your pocket, that those little pieces of paper that have put a trance on society, such that some of that paper you can turn it into real things. We'll talk about the philosophy of money. We'll lead a little discussion around that. Hopefully you guys will have some opinions. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin Justice League, aka the Bitcoin Alliance. Does Bitcoin police force or its own liaison between Bitcoin and law enforcement? We're going to talk about a new word for hopefully it'll be a new word or phrase for some of you. It's the PQC, post-quantum cryptography. What on earth is that? We shall see. We're going to go around the world to the United States. It's always exciting. Indonesia. Actually, Indonesia is going to go to the United States. China, Europe. Stay tuned for that. We got a little bit of local news. And what does Beyonce have to do with Bitcoin? Will, this is for you, man. I know you're all about the celebrities in the Bitcoin world. Beyonce, you heard it here first. All right. Stay tuned, folks. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. Bitcoin, I'm sorry. The Filter, the enemy in your pocket. Let's see. All right, everybody should be seeing what's on the screen up here. Is that in focus? All right. Let's take it away, maybe. There we go. Okay, so we are in Bali. What are we up to here in Bali? We're trying to create a Bitcoin economy. There's about 37 vendors that accept Bitcoin here, comparable to Jakarta or Singapore, but it's a much smaller place. We're trying to make that happen here in Bali. Hopefully this map will be covered with little Bitcoin someday, where you can just show up with a little Bitcoin on your phone and do anything you want. Mostly the case, you can get a hotel, a homestay, you can get dinner or lunch or breakfast. You can rent a scooter, get a massage. What else can you do? Buy Pulsa. What else would you want to do when you come to Bali? There's nothing else to do. Sitting on the beach is free. So we are coming to you live from Hubud. Hubud, our host here, kind enough to give us a very cool conference room to meet in every week. They provide the space and the high-speed internet, and this is where we meet every week. So if you're currently not in the room, if you're online and listening, and you find yourself in Bali on some future Tuesday, I hope you'll join us. This is the place to go. Just go to hubud.org. You can figure it out. What else is going on at Hubud? November 20th, we've got Startup Weekend. And I mentioned this last week as well. I'm lobbying for some sort of Bitcoin-related project. So sign up for Startup Weekend. Bring your Bitcoin ideas. I'm going to bring mine, and I'm going to be lobbying hard. We'll see if we can't make it happen. Last year, the Bitcoin Exchange was one of the sponsors, and they had no Bitcoin projects. So I'm taking matters into my own hands. What else is local? Bitcoin 101. Finally, we've got the date for Bitcoin 101, November 14th. That's next month, and I'm going to try to make the second Saturday of every month the regular Bitcoin 101. That should be jam-packed, given what's happened with the price. Oops, I didn't mean to mention the price. Something crazy is happening with the price. So mark your calendars, November 14th. It'll probably be like, I don't know, $2,000 or $3,000 by then. So make sure you sign up soon. While we're not together in person, we like to hang out in the virtual world, the Book of Face, in the Bitcoins in Bali group. This is where we crowdsource Bitcoin news. If it's got anything to do with Bitcoin or anything to do with Bali, and especially if it has something to do with Bitcoins in Bali, please go to Facebook and post it immediately. Also, I find it really interesting when you chime in with your own opinion on the top of these posts. That makes it interesting. So anyway, that's it. Let's turn to our own Rick Shrees with the numbers. Take it away, Rick.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, looking at the numbers, I mean, obviously it's been another happy week in Bitcoin land. Looking at the repeat price right now, we're seeing it just a little under 3.9 million per Bitcoin. Let's flip over and look at the U.S. chart, Gary. In U.S. dollar terms, we're seeing about...
This one is always a delay. You might need to come up with a different... there we go.
There we go. Just hovering right under 290, up 1% for the day. Now, what's interesting about this is if you look back from January 1st until today, we've only been over 300 two times. We were over 300 on January 1st, but we shaved that right off on January 2nd. And then July 15, we spiked at a little over 300, but again, it was gone the very next day. So in reality, we're testing this $300 price barrier again. We tested it in March, and then it backed off. We tested it in July, and it backed off. And now here we are 3 months later in almost exactly the same place we were 3 months ago, and almost exactly the same place where we were 7 months ago. So 300 is a really resilient price point, okay? This is a real ceiling. Now what's interesting here, if you look at that chart on the right-hand side, it says historical Bitcoin price. That's the last 8 days of trading. We've had only one day that we had a net down day, and it was down 1.07% on the 21st. We've had really strong days by and large across the board across this last week, and volume has been really strong. The story this week is the same as last week. The volume's all coming from China. When I looked at the last set of volume numbers, which was on Saturday, over 70% of the volume was coming out of the Chinese exchanges. Over 70%. Huge numbers. So this is the thing we need to watch if we're playing the Bitcoin game for appreciation right now. What in China may change? What in China may change? Because China is totally pushing the price at this point in time. It's really a one-player game, and you've got to have your finger on that pulse if you're looking at the Bitcoin thing from an investment perspective, which of course we never ever recommend. In this,
I don't care about the price myself.
I hear you. It has great utility value in other areas, but for those people who do play that game, watch China. It's all about China right now. It's a one-player game, one-horse race. Let's flip over and look at volatility numbers. Oh, sorry, at the network activity numbers. There we go. That's the one I wanted. A number of miners seem to have come online as a result of this price increase. Block turnaround time has decreased. I've been seeing block confirmation times averaging under 9 minutes this week multiple times. And right now, last 24 hours, it's right at 9 minutes. Remember, it was a couple of weeks ago, it was 10 minutes plus on average, right? So we've got more mining capacity online, more people are back in the game and playing hard. Because, hey, what's the current reward per block? We're now over $7,200 for a confirmation. So it starts to get interesting again. It wasn't very long ago we were seeing it 6.8. Let's look at the volatility numbers. What's interesting here is our 30-day moving average for volatility is approaching our 60-day average. In other words, we have across the last 60 days seen a fairly stable volatility rate. Now, mind you, it's a little higher than we like to see, right? I mean, we know that fiat currencies tend to run about 1% and lower, right? But these are not the big, scary numbers that we've seen several times across the last year. So, yes, we have had a rather steady escalation, but steady in any direction is good in volatility terms, right? It brings the volatility numbers down because it increases predictability. You don't need to be flat to have attractive volatility numbers. You need to be predictable and steady. And that seems to be what we have here at this point in time. Okay, one last slide we're going to look at today. What's happening with this whole block size debate? Well, where are we right now? Who is dominating the miners' thinking? We're about to roll into November, right? That whole 8 megabyte block argument was supposed to be resolved by December 31st if it was going to go, right? Well, here we are looking at the 1 month average. The 8 megabyte crowd is only responsible for 9% of the blocks. Flip over to the 24-hour average, Gary, please. And you can see actually they have managed to gain a little bit of ground at the expense of the BIP 100 crew primarily. What's interesting on this chart is just in the last few days, they have stopped counting the percentage of miners who are using BIP 101. The last number they have for the BIP 101 team was well below 1%, and now it's not even showing up. So from looking at this chart alone, I don't really have an opinion on it. It would appear that BIP 101 is pretty well and truly dead, right? The 8 megabyte block argument, well, it does have a little bit of strength, but hey, it needs to be 90% plus by the end of the year for it to go. We're a hell of a long ways from being there. On the other hand, BIP 100, looking pretty good, though it's shaved off a bit. However, it's still a long ways from being the consensus, well, speed to become a new standard. Consensus it may be, but unfortunately consensus isn't good enough to change things over. So this debate remains vital. We have seen some consolidation with BIP 101 basically dropping out of the running, but at this point in time, nobody knows yet which way this is going to go.
All right, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
You pretty much have to come every Tuesday because it's a cliffhanger every Tuesday.
Don't you know, right? Anything could happen. You know, Gary, before we blast off into the stratosphere, it occurred to me the other day as we were getting ready, I was looking at the numbers and getting ready for this. You know a word that I haven't heard in a really long time? Dogecoin.
Yeah. What happened to Doge?
Right, there's a whole topic, right? To the moon, boom!
Yeah, maybe they're on the moon.
Basement.
Maybe they're on the moon and they can't communicate with us anymore.
That's happened with almost every single altcoin.
Yeah, well, there hasn't been a whole lot of Litecoin in the news either. A big
Right,
player
except
in that space, right? The whole Litecoin space is quieted down except for Ripple. And of course the NXT guys who are, if nothing else, vocal. And Ethereum, but again, they've got some very visible people involved with Ethereum.
Right.
Well, you know, I'll just mention that a few weeks ago we covered Namecoin and OneName, and they had to switch from their own blockchain to the Bitcoin blockchain because they had security problems. There wasn't enough mining taking place on the nodes, and so they had to migrate to Bitcoin because Bitcoin obviously is the most secure, and really that's what you're paying for with Bitcoin is the security.
Maybe that's a discussion for another meeting. Is there a future for altcoins in the current?
Yeah, it's a good question because there seems to be, at least now, the consolidation seems to be around Bitcoin because no one else can compete security-wise.
Have you seen that Darkcoin use that those guys released a trading platform for altcoins decentralized?
Are you talking about the one where you don't need to log in, where it's Shapeshift?
Dash, right?
No, Peter sent it to me. This guy just released it. What's it? Is it Bank? It's
Well, don't you mean Dash?
it's in Dex.
Darkcoin
It's
is
Dex or something.
gone.
It's essentially replaces a Cryptsy or a Polynex and uses Darkcoin as its platform. But you can trade Bitcoin for any other altcoin. About
Is there any potential security issue around the fact that you're saying 70% of the demand's emanating out of China, the mining's all emanating out of China? Is there any issues to be looking for areas?
Yeah, well, you know, even though you can see that there are different mining pools, you never know if those mining pools are also colluding, right? And if you've got more than 51% inside China, I think that, you know, you could at least ask the question, like, what's really happening with Bitcoin mining behind the borders of China?
Well, that's it. Like, let's say that the Chinese government is involved in every corporation that actually exists in China, and there is some influence in the background, and the percentages go up into China. Does that erode confidence internationally outside of China? Because the figures are getting so high that all of a sudden, whether it's real or perceived, that China can exert undue influence on what's going on. Do people start going, well, hold on a second,
Yeah, I think that's possible no matter who. If you ever think that 51% of the mining power can be co-opted in any way, then you've got to question the validity of Bitcoin itself. So, yeah.
What's the percentage of mining?
China. That's a good question. I don't know.
It's well over 51%. I mean, you could look at these numbers right here and hash it out for the periods, right? Because this is, the pools, the blocks that they've settled in the last 24 hours, and what percentage they represent of the total block activity. So you can take that chart and figure out who's from China and run the numbers right there.
You can find out.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind that there's an economic disincentive, even for someone who has the computing power, to take themselves over 51%. And there's an economic disincentive to collude, because if it was ever known that that collusion was taking place, then people would exit Bitcoin, because the security, which is why you use Bitcoin, is compromised. So
there's a contrary argument to that too, right? There's an economic incentive to take down Bitcoin if your other thing, the incumbent, is threatened.
So we're talking about what Rick's been saying, that demand is being driven out of China, and potentially that as the Chinese government starts clamping down on what's happening in the economy and tries to put more controls in, people are using that as a safe harbor to get out of the Chinese economy. But surely, with what you're saying, the counter argument is that, hold on, let's shut this down, because our big economy, our main economy, is a lot more important to us than the Bitcoin thing, which is allowing people to portal out. Is there a concern around this?
Well, there has been actually a trend in the opposite direction of the Chinese government. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing the volume that we're seeing right now. There does actually seem to be a bit of a liberalization, or for a greater tolerance for Bitcoin-related activity, market activity. But your point's well taken. Your point's totally valid. And we've had some discussions about that in the past. How much of a threat is China to Bitcoin, right? How much is having this potentially homogenous player in the market? And yeah, I think there's a real possibility there that some of these could occur. And certainly, if the Chinese government were to put down their foot and say, absolutely no more of this, and get serious about it, it would have a huge impact on price. Huge impact on price. There's a real good argument that it would, certainly in the short to medium term, would cripple the market.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
I think mining power doesn't represent control of Bitcoin. Having 50%, over 50% of mining power doesn't give you control of Bitcoin. People outside of China don't have to follow the rules. You're following a protocol, and even if the Chinese miners decide to change the rules, you don't have to accept those rules. We just have a smaller hashing power. So the Chinese government can't enforce people outside of China to follow the rules. And just having hashing power doesn't give you control of the rules. It just allows you to put blocks onto the chain.
Well, I think, if I understand the threat that you're identifying, is the 51% attack is one thing. The ability to control a large amount of trading volume is a totally different thing. 51% attack, from my understanding, the only thing it's particularly good for is to be able to execute a double spin, right?
Yeah,
so it's
right.
avoid execute fraud, right?
Yeah.
I don't really think that's the threat that he's identified. The threat that he's identified is, let's say China's supplying 70% of the market volume right now. Well, if the Chinese government were to overnight say Bitcoin is banned and get serious about shutting down these exchanges, the loss of 70% of the volume on the markets would have a disastrous effect on the price.
Yeah.
That, I believe, is the threat that he's identified here, and much more of a realistic threat than the possibility that it could be 51%.
Yeah.
It's kind of three interrelated things. And the differentiation between the protocol and the network or the blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the interesting things that came out of the CoinDesk report this last time is that the deterioration in the number of nodes seems to have stabilized. So that whole threat of a decrease, a continuing slide in the number of active nodes seems to have been stemmed. So that was good to see.
Probably because we mentioned the BitSeed project here, and people,
Nodes is
That's where the record.
All right. Let's move on. I've got a ton of stuff to cover here. That was a grim discussion, though. Unexpected and good, just the way we like it. Okay. I'm going to blow through some news here rather quickly, but maybe you want to check it out yourself. Jokowi was in Washington, D.C. Did you guys realize that President of Indonesia was in the Oval Office and talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Jeez, he looks like he's overstayed, I believe.
Yes, he's going to.
That's pretty suspicious.
Yeah, it's not a very pleasant expression on his face. This guy looks very mad. He looks very upset. And he's obviously just recolored his hair black. So, no. I thought it was interesting that they're talking about ship that they're the States. It's not really Bitcoin related, but I think it's just it's interesting. Now he's the first Indonesian president to do a state visit for the last 10 years, I think. And also, I think Obama's been here twice.
There's no way Indonesia will join TPP. I don't like TPP.
Well,
There's no way Indonesia will join.
Well, it's anti-China. It's like kind of aligned against China, and but it's a political thing. And I think in this article he's saying that they're willing to do it. So, what makes you say that they wouldn't join the TPP?
It's such a protectionist.
Yeah, it's just a railroad.
I mean, I don't support the TPP, but
The amount of stuff Indonesia would have to change to meet it would be astronomical.
Indonesia's notoriously protectionist economy has been stymied by systemic corruption, lower commodity.
Just for the political stuff.
Yes.
So they can share some.
That's all I think is being said here. Is like, yeah, we support it to get
We like
extra. Yeah. We support the agenda. La, la, we've got la, la.
Did you guys know? Did you guys know this fact though that unemployment amongst the youth is 20% plus? Well, who knows how they count such things?
Yeah, how do you count that?
But you just walk out the door in Jakarta and start counting people in the alleyway.
How many people are asking for taxi?
Do they say anything in there about how, like, impractical things, or just they support TPP and that's it?
Yeah, I mean it's a kind of a fluffy piece. I don't know what actually took place.
I'd write that off as pure today.
Yeah.
He did rush back because of the haze problem. So he was going to go meet with Facebook and talk about selfie proliferation in Indonesia,
Really?
but had to cut that short. All right, moving along. China. Now we're getting back into our wheelhouse of macroeconomic data. The People's Bank of China has cut its one-year benchmark interest rate to 4.35%. I don't know what it was before, but they've recently come under 7% growth. The 7% growth rate, which is what they have predicted. They also cut the ratio of Chinese currencies, that basically the reserve ratio that banks have to keep in order for their fractional reserve lending, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, all in an effort to juice the economy, right? They fell below 7%. So what can they do? They can print money to get people to spend it. They can lower interest rates, and they can lower the bank's reserve rate. But it's analogous to pushing on a string, because all those things are trying to invoke the wealth effect, like how rich do people feel and their propensity to spend, and what's the cost to borrow money. Is money cheap enough where you make an investment where you otherwise wouldn't? They make, well, I think it's here that they made a good point. This is an excellent little infographic. If you haven't watched it, look why China's economy is slowing down. And it's not because they haven't lowered interest rates far enough, and not because they haven't printed enough money. Basically, in their growth curve, they're transitioning from having to build infrastructure. He makes the point that they've already built all the trains, all the bridges, all the cities that they need to build, and now the economy needs to switch over to a more creative economy, more service-oriented, service-supported, from manufacturing, from infrastructure. And he says that that's going to be a difficult transition for them to make. because it's changing.
Ecosystem basis sort of hierarchical.
Right, and they're very good at building factories, very good at building trains, but inventing the next iPhone, maybe not. I mean, there's a billion people. They must have some creative people, right?
They're really creative at stealing.
Maybe they'll bring stealing into the modern age for all of us to benefit from. Anyway, check out this guy, Tyler Cowen. He's a smart guy, and it's a really well done video. All right, last but not least, Mario Draghi. It seems like this stimulus is contagious. They're doing it all around the world. QE to infinity. This is a comment piece. It's not a news piece, but QE to infinity and bond markets blowing an even bigger bubble than that which led to the Lehman collapse.
No shit.
Yeah, and he didn't actually. He didn't. What's that?
It's a virus. They all catch it.
It is. They think that they can borrow and spend their way out of this problem, and after a certain point, nature asserts herself. Reality sets in. The tail can wag, and I think we're at that point. Bring it on. I mean, it makes me happy when these central bank policies start to fail, because it means that maybe some semblance of reality will set in, and we can all get back to living in the real world. You know, we all live in the real world. It's the bankers that try to manipulate things with the symbols of money, and it's been going on for too long, I think. So. All right, so let's get on to some news items that were posted by people in the Facebook group. We've got this thing called Voxelus. Is that how you pronounce it? Voxelus? It is the currency for virtual reality. What do you know about this thing, Giorgio? I mean,
not that much, to be honest. I just
what I want to know is,
so
can you buy, like, can you get a virtual date with this girl?
What?
With is that why I should I get my hands on some of this virtual reality currency?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be a currency for not only playing but also creating virtual reality anything.
Well, you know, that's what makes it really interesting. Is it seems like it's a development platform for virtual reality games. And is there an incentive if you've got money built into the development platform, where if they could create a virtual reality economy within this ecosystem of games, then you could actually earn money in one virtual reality game and then go spend it in another virtual reality game, and never move out of your parents' basement.
Well, the only thing that I sort of got interested in it is because I feel like Second Life was sort of one of the earlier, you know, they came up with they had their own currency. They still have it.
Yes.
Currency. What is it called again?
Linden dollars.
Yeah, and I feel like from there on, there were a lot of people who caught up on it, and maybe more people would transition to this. And it is one of these things where when I can see it, it's like, well, maybe it makes a little bit of sense. Yeah, well, I am still skeptical to a lot of the alt currencies generally, but I do think this is maybe a bit different.
Whenever I see someone launching a new coin, I ask myself, well, why couldn't they use Bitcoin to do the same thing? I don't know, maybe, you know, they couldn't integrate it enough into the development platform, or maybe they couldn't do so economically. You know, even though Bitcoin is cheap, you know, 6 cents a transaction can add up if you're trying to do it en masse. So I'd be interested if we had the creators in the room, we could grill them on why they need their own currency. Maybe they have some good reasons.
So they're doing a crowd sale. So essentially, people that would buy this currency would fund the platform. So I guess that's one of the reasons. It's basically
so this doesn't actually exist yet. This is how they're funding their development.
Funding development of the platform. So I've noticed people now use their own currency as a way to fund a project. I mean, it's the same with the what was it? The game.
Linden?
No, the prediction
Prediction markets?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's the same. They could use anything, but they're funding the
So you just
problem.
make a currency and then you.
They need
Yeah.
tokens.
Yes. It's called pump and
I
dump,
guess so. Yeah.
and you're hopefully it's not a.
Oh
that
yeah,
part
I
doesn't-
guarantee that it's going to be pump and dump, but then essentially
Maybe that's enough for them to get started.
if it finds itself a way, then a few years later it will be actually used.
Well, when you think about it, like lending dollars, you need a currency for this virtual world, and then you map it onto stuff. It does make sense, right?
Yeah.
Like Augur, you needed the token to make the thing work down the track, and they need. There's probably a lot of reasons why you wouldn't use Bitcoin within that virtual world. Probably some great reasons.
Yeah. Well, and not all schemes are nefarious, pump and dump. Get rich quick.
Yeah, but if you look, I took a look at a lot of the altcoins, and there's literally a trend. Starts out high, then it gets dumped, and then some go up again slowly, and some never. So
Well, that's the typical hype curve, right? You have this initial spike, reality sets in, and you have this long trudge towards its real value. And for many altcoins, I think we don't know what the long-term viability of them is, but
now most altcoins are a bit better. They offer something a bit better, but it's not like 10 times better.
right,
In my opinion.
right.
So that's why they don't work.
I wonder if they're first going to create virtual reality for the development environment for their virtual reality. Like you got to put on a helmet, and all of the other 10 developers are like not real. Just so you. Anyway. All right, moving on. Public service announcement. People are having problems withdrawing from Cryptsy. It's reminiscent of Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox had similar problems where people were making large withdrawals and they weren't able to do it. So if you've got anything on Cryptsy, beware. And I think it's just a good cautionary note. If you've got Bitcoins sitting somewhere where you, or any virtual currency, and you don't have the keys, then you don't have that digital asset. You simply do not own it. It is owned by somebody else, and Cryptsy could get hacked. It could be an inside job. If you don't have your keys, you don't have your Bitcoin, and it's a good thing to keep in mind. Cryptsy is an exchange.
Where is it?
I don't know.
American.
That's American.
Any problem? What's the whisper?
What's the what?
You can't take it seriously with that name.
Like what's the whisper? What's the problem? Are they going under? Or?
Take your own
Look at
Bitcoin
it,
and
she's
own
like,
it.
I don't know. Delayed withdrawals.
Yeah, they do that.
Of crypto.
How delayed?
Exactly.
Day or two.
But they're actually going through eventually.
Yeah, they're still up and running, but the dogs are barking. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Plus 30% one day. Top week. Wow.
What is that?
Ether prices.
Ether prices off. It's going to the roof, but it went down. It hit rock bottom.
Yeah, real low. But not as low as pre-sale.
Yeah, I mean, people that went to the pre-sale made shit back, well, not shit ton of it. Made
A lot.
pre-sale Bitcoin was $600. It gets you 2,000. At peak, it was about 180 per Ether. So essentially, you've at least quadrupled your money.
Yeah.
All right, moving along. Let's see here. The Blockchain Alliance, what I refer to as the Bitcoin Justice League. This is a consortium. This guy, Jerry Brito, I think he's a lawyer. They're trying to reach out to the various agencies of the U.S. government. They're going to talk to other governments later, but we're number one. Go USA. And they've got a bunch of quotes from people I've never heard of. Here's the list of government agencies that they're interfacing with: the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, FBI, Secret Service. A lot of people don't know the Secret Service is responsible for the currency. Commodity Future Trading Commission, and the U.S. Marshals. I thought that was a pretty long list. It's amazing, a little thing like Bitcoin comes along and there's like 7 or 8 agencies. So for fun, I took a look at how many federal agencies there are. Can you see this little scroll bar here? Check this out. This is like all the US agencies. Check out all those agencies. I think they all need to regulate Bitcoin though.
Yeah, yeah.
We definitely need some Bitcoin, maybe another Bitcoin alliance to reach out to the Office of Educational Technology. That's got technology in it. They must care about Bitcoin. By the way, I think the US government has more office space than all of the US companies combined.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a big thing, the US government. We're about halfway here. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I just wanted to make that point. Yes, yes. So this is a very puny list. I think we need more.
So they're going to make another agency.
Yes, they need the Bitcoin agency liaison agency.
They can create agencies like this too. President created one a couple of years ago. Just,
Task force, czar, task force, czar, agency, bureau. Oh, and on this Wikipedia page, it's kind of interesting. It says, legislative definitions of a federal agency are varied and even contradictory. And then it says, anyway, it makes the point that not even the government knows how many agencies the U.S. government has.
What is this act? The Government in the Sunshine Act.
Ooh, that sounds interesting, doesn't it? Government in the Sunshine Act. I'll pull that up just for you.
Vacation day policy.
Let's see, enacted in 1976, the U.S. law affects the operations of the federal government, Congress, federal commissions, and other legally constituted federal bodies. It does Freedom of Information Acts, FOIA requests. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. Yeah.
That's how they call Florida Sunshine State.
All right, guys, I've got a bunch more stories here, which I will post, but I want to get on to the discussion of money, and I've got a little video that I want to play for you, which is it explains it way more succinctly than I could myself, and it'll give us some fodder to discuss the nature of money. Now, it's going to talk about various government agencies that are involved in the money creation, the U.S. Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and then the commercial banks. 2 of those are part of the government. I guess the Federal Reserve is like a quasi-government entity, but you'll see them talk about those 3. Don't blink, it goes kind of quick, but it'll give us a foundation for a little bit of a discussion on the nature of money on the other side. So check this out.
The Treasury issues IOUs, bonds. The banks then buy those IOUs with currency. The Federal Reserve then writes IOUs, checks, and hands them to the banks in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. And currency is created. So what's really happening is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are just swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and abracadabra, presto, currency magically springs into existence. This process repeats and repeats over and over again, enriching the banks and indebting the public by raising the national debt. The end result is that there's a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury. This process is also where all paper currency comes from. The Federal Reserve and the government mistakenly call it base money because they didn't watch episode 1 of this series and they don't know the difference between money and currency. But I will correctly refer to it as base currency because it is not money. It is currency, and as we've learned, there's a big difference. Money has to be a store of value and maintain its purchasing power over long periods of time. We learned in episode 1 that earlier in our history, our paper currency was just a plain check. It was a representation for real money of intrinsic value, the gold and silver that was held on deposit at the Treasury. You could walk into any bank and slap your currency, like say a $20 bill on the counter, and redeem it for real money, a $20 gold piece. But now, this base currency that's piling up back here is really nothing but a receipt or a claim check on an IOU, that bond. So it's really nothing but a supply of numbers. The Treasury then deposits the newly created currency into the various branches of the government, and the politicians say, hey, thanks for that. And the government does some deficit spending, on public works, social programs, and war. The government employees, contractors, and soldiers then deposit their pay in the banks. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but when you deposit your currency with the bank, you're not actually depositing it into an account to be safely held in trust for you. Instead, you're actually loaning the bank your currency, and within certain legal limits, they can do with it pretty much anything they please. This includes gambling in the stock market and loaning it out at a profit, of course. Now, this is where the machine of currency creation really gets cranky, because this is where something called fractional reserve lending comes into play. Fractional reserve lending is exactly what it says. The banks are allowed to reserve only a fraction of your deposit and loan the rest out. Although reserve ratios may vary, I'm going to use a 10% reserve ratio as our example. If you deposit $100 of your account, the bank can legally take $90 of it and loan it out without telling you. The bank must hold $10 of your deposit in reserve just in case you want some of it. These reserves are called vault cash. But why does your bank account still say you have $100 if the bank has stolen $90 of it? Because the bank left IOUs it created called bank credit in its place. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but here it is in black and white from the Fed. Commercial banks create checkbook money when they grant a loan simply by adding new deposit dollars in accounts on their books in exchange for a borrower's IOU. These are nothing but numbers that the banks type into their computers. And even though these bank credit IOU numbers are very different from base currency numbers, because they only exist in computers, they are still currency. So now there is $190 in existence. Now, the reason people take out loans from the banks is to buy something. They're going to buy a house or a car or something like that. So the borrower takes the $90 that the bank loaned to him from your account, and he pays the seller of the item. But then the seller deposits that currency into his account, and his bank loans out 90% of that and leaves bank credit numbers in its place. So now there's $271 in existence. This process repeats and repeats until under a 10% reserve ratio, an initial deposit of just $100 can create up to $1,000 of bank credit, all backed by $100 of vault cash, just 10%. But as I said, reserve ratios vary wildly. On some deposits, it's 10%, on others, it's 3%, and on some forms of deposits, reserve requirements are 0. The result is that the expansion of the currency supply by the banks is far greater than even this example would lead you to believe. So once again, when currency is deposited in the banks get to lend it out, and then it gets redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent over and over again, creating bank credit all the way. This is where the vast majority of our currency supply comes from. In fact, 92 to 96% of all currency in existence is created not by the government, but here in the banking system. Now, massive amounts of currency spewing into society may at first sound like a fun idea. That is, until you remember one of the most important hidden secrets of money from episode 1, that the prices of everyday goods and services act as a sponge on an expanding currency supply. The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from. The true definition of inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Rising prices are merely the symptom. So our entire currency supply is nothing but a couple of bucks whipped up in this hocus-pocus scam where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve swap glorified IOUs, and a bunch of numbers that the banks just type into their computers. That's it. That's our entire currency supply. It's nothing but a supply of numbers. Some of them printed, most of them typed, and there is nothing else. But if you thought that was crazy, get ready to enter the twilight zone of modern economics. We work for some of that currency supply. True wealth is your time, but we trade away moments hour by hour, day by day, and year by year for numbers that somebody printed on pieces of paper or just typed into a computer. Now those numbers represent our blood, sweat, tears, labor, ideas, and talent. We are what gives the currency its value. But here comes the really cruel joke. We work hard so that we can save some of that currency, so that we can pay the tax collector. In the United States, it's known as the IRS. They then turn it over to the Treasury so that the Treasury can pay the principal plus interest on that bond that the Federal Reserve bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. Now let's do a recap on this section, because this is where the system begins to rob you and I on a mess.
All right, so I'll leave it there. It's a great series, very educational. Some of it is a bit, I don't know, there are some contrarian opinions to the ones held in this video that aren't well represented, but if you're a thinking person, you can come up with them yourself. But how many of you, I'm just curious, were familiar with the money creation process? Almost everybody in the room. And does anybody have does anyone care to defend the fractional reserve system? I'll do it if there's no one in the room that.
Put your banker hat on.
Yes, I'll get out my top hat and cane and my cigar, a la JP Morgan. Well, okay, so let me just give it a shot. You're a bank, and you've got to manage the resources of your community such that things in the economy grow. Right, so you're in the business of taking, everybody in this room, we all use the same bank, we all make our money, put it in the bank, and if Johnny wants to create a new album and he wants to borrow some money, the banker decides that's a good use of the community's money because we want a new album from Johnny, right? You borrow the money and pay us back with interest when you make your first gold record, right? Now, if we simply loan out the money that everyone has saved, then if Johnny's album, I know this is far-fetched, but if it ends up not making money, then not only do we all not get interest, but we actually, the amount of our savings has gone down, right? Because if that system does not accommodate a default, right? But if we use the fractional reserve method, then we've simply created the money that you need. We've spread that risk out across a bunch of portfolio of customers, and we've got a lot more leeway if any one loan goes bad, because we've actually created the money to loan out to the people in the community. What do you think? No? So what's wrong with that argument? Would it be okay if we only
Because the profits all what's wrong? Basically, you're putting money in your pocket. Yeah.
Right, but I had to do the work.
Adding?
I earned that money because I had to do the work of evaluating Johnny's skills. Yeah, paying for my pillars out in front of my bank.
Why could we not do that ourselves? Yeah.
Well, they have this thing in the States called a savings and loan, or a credit union, where they try to do some of that stuff. But I think even credit unions do the fractional reserve thing. I'm not sure. I mean, but yeah. Right. But there is something a little bit offensive to, money earns money, right? That's the interest rate. Right. And they do have to do some work. They have to find Johnny. They have to send him, statements every month. They have to type in some numbers. But it is non-trivial, right? I mean, they perform a function in society. At least they used to before things got so crazy like they are today. Now they're not loaning to some industrious young man like Johnny. They're trying to find someone who can't afford a mortgage to get them on the hook for the next 30 years. And to your point, my cousin just bought a house in Washington, D.C., or the Washington, D.C. area, which is, let's just say government is good business these days in the United States, and housing prices are high. He bought a $500,000 house, right? And in order to secure that loan, the bank, if you've got a 10% reserve ratio, basically the bank is only on the hook for $50,000. But they're collecting interest on $500,000 for the next 30 years.
And that's,
And
that's
if
a
he-
big part of the business.
if he ever defaults, they get the house, which is presumably worth something near 500,000.
Plus, they collect on insurance.
Yeah.
There's mortgage insurance on top of it that the banks hold, and they get that house is pure profit.
And
So they get the full amount twice.
And the mortgage pays for that insurance.
That's correct.
So,
Yeah, right.
I think it's like, you know, you said that the role of the bank is to manage the resources of the community, but they're not incentivized to get banks incentivized on the ground.
Yeah.
That's just,
right. That's a good point, a great point. There's the sense of community has been lost. I think that's why we had the mortgage crisis, because yeah, they were like, oh, who needs a loan? You need a loan? Are you breathing? Like, okay, I don't care if you can't pay. Like, let's get your name on the dotted line, and we'll package this up. So,
Right? That's what It's a Wonderful Life was about.
yes.
Right?
Well,
We did do that at one point.
so how do we find the local banker?
Back in the old
Well,
days.
there's the peer-to-peer lending getting quite big, and essentially a peer-to-peer lending platform could serve a purpose of a bank.
I mean, Kickstarter and all of those things, crowdsourcing, basically.
Yeah, I think you know, and I think these innovations are, well, I guess Kickstarter doesn't rely on cryptocurrency, but you can see how Bitcoin and the financial innovation that's coming along behind it could change the game. I think we have lost the sense of community. We've lost the community banker, and we've lost the sense of community that bankers could or should or might have.
I think there's some exceptions, like I've been in Spain for a long time, and there's a prominent bank there, and they invest a lot of money into social programs, like a lot into art programs, music programs, cultural programs. Like I've never seen that anywhere else.
Yeah.
And basically all the entries to all those programs are free for people.
Right.
So, you know,
Right, and society benefits if they
Yeah,
do
in a
find a
really
good
big way.
use for everyone's savings,
Yeah.
and you've got a nice park or a new factory or like, you know,
like
then
cultural events, like really big cultural
right,
events,
it
they're all
improves
free.
the life of the people that live in that place. But
The problem, you're getting into a big area. Like, the problem is not, you know, the bankers being responsible for the community. The problem is corporations.
with the profit motive.
Corporation, your number one aim is to make money. Profitability. So
And
there
that's
is no,
right.
you know, it's corporate social responsibility. It's just pure chaos. Absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Until they change what the actual
The point of it.
the point of a corporation is,
Yeah.
nothing's going to change. And this is the big corporation that's come out in England recently to try and change what the mandate is of the company. So it's still about changing, like
Yeah,
oil companies.
nothing would change unless.
About the environment. It's all about making money. The best way to make money. This is what we're seeing going on in Indonesia at the moment with the palm oil. So we don't care what devastation happens. Make money.
This is where the investors come in. This is where the investors come in, though, because investors can make a choice on where their money gets invested, and in there could be an incentive that's more than just the profit motive. You know, if you've got a nest egg of $500,000 and you decide, like, well, I want it to go to Pixar because they make movies that inspire people, or I want it to go to, you know, some company that's going to, you know, clean up the garbage in Bali, and you get a return. I think people want a return, but they also want to contribute to the world, right? And that doesn't always show up in
It's
the
called impact investment.
yeah.
But theoretically, yeah, that like all makes sense. But who's doing the majority of the investing? Who's doing those? It's fund managers. What's their motive? It's profit. And why is it profit? Because their bonuses are close to the profit. So it all comes back to pure money, right?
Or you can do the impact investment, or you can
No, not impact investing. But if you've got the decision yourself to, and you know, you can make ethical decisions. Like, I'm not going to invest in the oil industry, right? So I don't like that. I'm going to invest in education program or something. So that it is providing positive impact. But the problem is, it's not the disconnect between the person that has got the capital and who's making the investment is now massive. Like, the biggest investment industry in Australia is the pension scheme, superannuation. Who's making those investments? It's not the person individually. It's the fund. The same as places like 401ks and everything like that.
Well, this is why I think the whole thing is such a big racket, because first of all, you've got inflation, so you've always got to find a place for your money to make money. right? And the whole thing has become so complicated that people don't have enough time to do their research, right? And those pension funds, that's what Wall Street refers to as the dumb money. Like, stick those pensioners in that dog, mortgage-backed security fund, and we'll buy an insurance policy against it. But the genesis of all that is inflation, in my mind, because first of all, in an inflation economy, people have just got to work and work and work, and they're always behind because there's inflation happening, right? Especially for poor people.
Well, because of the profit margin as well. I think
right.
That's the key. Like, if that wasn't there, then everything.
Or if at least if it was abated, if it wasn't such a necessity, people would have more free time. Their money wouldn't be disappearing systemically, and they'd have more. They could be more cognizant of where that money was being applied in society.
I think the future is the solution money. Like, I think we will destroy our world just because of that, because profit is wrong. It's not leading anywhere.
Just to be devil's advocate on this, I mean, in the U.S. you do have a choice. If you want to invest your money in savings and loan instead of mega banks, you can. When you walk in the door of a savings and loan, when you make a deposit, you're given shares in the savings and loan. And so then you participate in that savings and loan as a shareholder. It's like a financial co-op. And a number of people were flushed out of the savings and loans in the 1980s when a number of the savings and loans collapsed. And the FSLIC came in and guaranteed savings and loans. But at that point in time, it winnowed out, wrong word, a whole bunch of the small savings and loans players, and a lot of people lost their investments. What's happened, though, is, you get a choice. You can go invest in the savings and loan. They've got one branch. They have a limited number of services that probably don't have internet banking. Or you can go to the city court. They've got 15 branches across the city. You can make a deposit anywhere, any place when you're on the road.
And an implicit backing of the U.S. taxpayer.
But
those big banks.
They've got a wide range of services. They've got the convenience factor. And so then if you want to hedge your bet, you want to participate, you buy shares in city court. That's the way it works. That's the way it's set up to work. So to be devil's advocate, remember that's what I started out by saying here. I'm not saying I totally endorse this policy.
No, this is good.
That's the way to look at this. You've got a choice. You can go with the savings and loan if you want to take the small town participant investor scheme, or if you're going to go with the mega banks, you should be owning stock in that mega bank, or you shouldn't be doing business with that mega bank.
That mega bank
But-
doesn't make profit.
Correct, and that's how you mitigate the fees, because you're picking up the backside for the
You're
investment
actually
from the
making
dividends.
But I'll make the point again, though, that those big banks, the reason there's been so much consolidation in banking in the States is because they've got the implicit backing of the U.S. government. They get bailed out. So that means their cost of doing business is lower. They can be much more risky than the little savings and loan. Little savings and loan has to probably watch every single loan they've got, because if they go under, they're not going to get federal bailout.
Yeah, like which other industry is going to just be bailed out if they, fail, literally fail?
The FSLIC now does provide depositors with insurance up to a certain amount of money.
Much less than ever.
So,
Yes.
so the thing is,
There is some insurance there.
it's like, all there's two things here. You got these banks, right? And they can't go under. Right?
Yeah,
That's what
it's
I'm talking.
impossible.
Because that reserve ratio, if they do go under, all the money evaporates, and all of trade stops. People stop
That's why they
in the
have to be
supermarket,
safe.
food, all this, right? But then, so that's a problem. That's not the issue. But then, the video, it's like they're just also part of forms in the bigger system that's sucking all the money to the centralized control of the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that is a bigger issue. Because the banks aren't, they're doing their stuff and these issues, systemic issues there. But there's a wider systemic issue that what's happening at the government here. Imagine if this was all community-based and it was looking after the economy, right? It's still being dictated by a centralized government that can then take that money. It's, you're diluting or you're inflating away the money supply, and there's a shit pile of money ending up here, which, it's been a war or whatever you see there, the US. Isn't that the bigger problem?
I would agree with there, the biggest problem is the assumption that a corporation is the best thing in the world to be and to consistently maximize profits year over year over year, forever with no end in sight until you exhaust resources.
Yeah, and then the end will be that. Exhaust the resources.
There's no responsibility from the people who are actually doing, what's the corporation.
Right, it's at any cost. The assumption is profit at any cost. And we have been complicit in this, and our consumer behavior has been cultivated to support it.
But also, I've noticed like in the States, like there's so much like advertisement to get you to put in your money into a savings account that gives you like 0.25% interest. There's like Bank of America had this like your piggy bank change gets to the savings account, or it's good for your family. 0.25%. Are you fucking kidding me? It's horrible for my family. But nobody talks about, as you said, most people would actually put their money something like that rather than actually investing. Most people don't invest. They're scared of the stock market. They can't really buy it. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what to do with the stocks. They don't know what to do with the taxes afterwards. Most people, you're right. Most people don't invest. It's on bigger scale.
But now we do have crowdfunding. We didn't for many, many years.
Yes.
And micro-lending, microfinance.
That we can actually educate ourselves and place our money
That's
where we
true.
choose.
So you're crowdfunding baby corporations.
Yeah, like it's all the same.
In a way,
Unless
true.
you
But I
change
might
the
also
program.
be crowdfunding Johnny's record,
But look at,
and the things that I care about in the world.
this seems to be for me, like some cool innovation is coming from Kickstarter. Just by like people that have, like look at that hive, that honey hive thing, by the hive or whatever it was. You guys saw that on
Well,
Kickstarter.
yeah.
Such a simple thing that Dad and son have been working on for like 10 years. And because they could put that on Kickstarter, they got access to capital to be able to roll with it. You try pitching that to a banker. They're going to make a honey hive thing. It's going to go anywhere. The only people that are going to have controlled innovation for the last 30, 50 years have been corporations. So now it's getting outside of that ecosystem and empowering people that have ideas to have a craft. So it's a start.
I just on the flip side of corporations are evil, which I can't agree with for the last 100-odd years. There's a sea change happening. There's a post-industrial age coming, and it's started.
Here, yeah.
It's here, and these are the companies that Jeff Bezos was saying, I invest in a company that has a mission. I invest in missionaries, not mercenaries. And the funny thing about missionaries is they change the world and they make more money in the end. So if you look at the companies that are big now and are going colossal, companies like Tesla, SpaceX, Google, and they've got a vision. And in this new age, there's an argument that says this is all change.
Like the profit motive.
The what?
The profit motive is like the motive for these companies is not for the profit.
No,
That's
Right, it's social something.
Yeah.
A mission, not a mercenary.
Maybe that's not their number one thing. Maybe maybe it's number two, maybe number one.
Yeah, it's secondary, and you'd see that in CEO statements, founder CEO statements to the shareholder. I think Jeff Bezos did that, saying this is the roadmap of Amazon, this is where we're going to get out. If you're not in that vision.
Then you read about Amazon and they're like, you have to work like 24 hours and they're sacked if they don't pass food.
But the break room's got great books in there.
Amazon sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. So is Tesla
Like exploit.
And SpaceX
and SpaceX, but that's the policy of the company. If you don't like it,
Yeah, but that also comes from the profit motive thing.
That's
driving,
true.
Like,
all
so,
the mission.
but
All the mission as well.
yeah, like if their mission is to make books like 2 cents, then obviously they've got to like screw their workers. That's the other.
I mean that is a huge fucking topic.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
No, this is a great
we're out of time, and I think money can be a very boring topic. You don't want to get caught next to the CPA at the cocktail party.
Hey,
But 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 anyway, I love the smart people in this room, and thanks for making it a lively conversation, and to be continued. That's all our time. Thanks, guys.
Anybody want to buy some Bitcoin from Rupiah? I need some Rupiah.